Michael Carter was the kind of student who easily disappeared in a crowd. A second-year student at Riverdale High School in Texas, he mastered the art of staying unnoticed. Every day, he slipped into the classroom just before the bell, settling into the seat farthest from the teacher's gaze. His hood often obscured his face, his voice barely above a murmur when called upon. He wasn't invisible, but he might as well have been. To most of his peers, Michael was the quiet guy, someone who melted into the background without a trace. What no one knew, not even his closest teachers, was that Michael Carter had another identity. By day, he was the silent student who avoided eye contact in the hallways. By night, he transformed into Mike Smash, a teenage boxing prodigy. His matches were legendary in the local sports circuit, earning him titles and admiration among boxing enthusiasts. Yet Michael chose to keep his alter ego hidden, fearing the weight of scrutiny that fame could bring. One particular morning, as Michael walked through the main hallway of Riverdale High, his mind drifted to the match he had won the previous weekend. The cheers of the crowd, the thud of gloves against the punching bag, it all felt like a different world compared to the sterile walls of the school. Lost in thought, he barely noticed Brad Johnson, the school's notorious bully, swaggering toward him. Brad was as loud and domineering as Michael was quiet and restrained. With his towering frame and ever-present smirk, Brad thrived on intimidating anyone who dared to cross him. Flanking him, as usual, was Dylan, his loyal but reluctant sidekick, who seemed to follow more out of fear than loyalty. "Watch it, loser!" Brad's voice boomed as Michael accidentally brushed past him, his arms full of textbooks. The collision was slight, but Brad made it into a spectacle. Michael froze, gripping his books tightly as Brad's booming laugh echoed through the hallway. With a quick motion, Brad knocked the books out of Michael's hands, scattering them across the floor. "Pick 'em up, quiet boy, or are you too weak for even that?" Brad jeered, drawing chuckles from his small circle of onlookers. Michael knelt silently, gathering his books one by one. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but from the deep restraint he had learned in the boxing gym. Eddie Simmons, his coach, always drilled into him the mantra, "Control is strength. Never waste a fight outside the ring." As Michael stood up, he locked eyes with Dylan for a brief moment. There was something in Dylan's expression, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by Brad's roaring laugh. Michael exhaled quietly, turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the laughter and whispers in his wake. But Brad wasn't done. "Hey, coward! Don't just walk away when I'm talking to you," Brad's voice chased after him, filled with mockery. Michael didn't stop. He knew better than to give Brad the reaction he wanted. By lunchtime, the incident had already become the latest hallway gossip. "Did you see how Brad humiliated Carter?" Someone whispered in the cafeteria. Others exchanged glances. Some pitying Michael, others dismissing him as just another weakling who couldn't stand up for himself. In reality, Michael was anything but weak. That very evening, he was back at Eddie's gym, fists wrapped and sweat dripping as he pummeled the heavy bag. The rhythmic pounding of his gloves against the leather was both a release and a reminder of who he truly was. Eddie watched from a distance, his arms crossed, nodding approvingly. "Nice work tonight, kid," Eddie said as Michael finished his rounds. "Remember, the ring's the only place that matters. Don't let those school punks get in your head." Michael nodded, his mind replaying the morning's humiliation. He could have fought back, ended Brad's bravado with a single well-placed hook. But that wasn't the kind of fighter he wanted to be. Unbeknownst to Michael, Brad's disdain for him was growing. The bully was unused to being ignored, and Michael's refusal to engage only stoked his frustration. For Brad, dominance was everything, and Michael's quiet resilience felt like an insult. The stage was set for tensions to escalate. But what neither Brad nor anyone else at Riverdale High realized was that Michael's patience had limits. Beneath his composed exterior, a storm was brewing, and when it broke, it would change everything. Days passed, but the tension in Riverdale High's hallways lingered. The humiliation Michael endured had become a favorite topic of idle chatter among students, though his silent demeanor remained unchanged. He carried on, blending into the background as always, but inside he was preparing for a battle of a different kind. One morning, as Michael stepped into the bustling hallway, his eyes caught a series of brightly colored posters taped to the walls. Riverdale Sports Fair, they read in bold letters, featuring a list of events and a prominent mention of a special guest, Mike Smash. The champion boxer would make a public appearance, conducting demonstrations and meeting fans. The posters, along with the accompanying buzz, spread like wildfire through the school. Michael's heart sank. His secret identity wasn't exactly in jeopardy, but the proximity of his two worlds made him uneasy. Riverdale High students didn't know who Mike Smash really was, but Michael knew that any slip-up at the fair could shatter his carefully maintained anonymity. During lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with speculation. "I heard Mike Smash can knock out opponents twice his size," one student said, gesturing dramatically. Another chimed in, "Do you think he's as scary in person as he looks on TV?" Brad, however, dismissed the talk with an eye roll. "Boxing's for meatheads," he sneered, stabbing at his plate with a plastic fork. Yet behind his dismissive tone was a glimmer of irritation. He hated when the attention wasn't on him. Meanwhile, Dylan sat quietly beside Brad, poking at his own food. Though he didn't speak up, something about the posters struck a chord. He couldn't quite place it, but the name Mike Smash felt oddly familiar. As the chatter around him continued, Dylan's thoughts drifted to Michael Carter. Could there be more to the quiet kid than anyone realized? The idea felt absurd, but it lingered in the back of his mind. That evening, Michael returned to Eddie's gym, hoping to escape the noise. The comforting scent of sweat and worn leather greeted him as he entered. He spent hours perfecting his jabs, weaving through imaginary punches and drilling combinations until his muscles burned. Eddie, always watchful, approached him as he, "Cool down. Michael, you've seen the posters, right?" Eddie's voice was calm, but carried a weight of expectation. Michael nodded, wiping his face with a towel. "Yeah, I've seen them. Look, I know this isn't ideal for you," Eddie continued, "but this event's big for the gym. You showing up as Mike Smash will inspire a lot of kids. They look up to you even if they don't know it's you." Michael sighed. He knew Eddie was right. The gym had been his sanctuary, the place where he found discipline and purpose. If making a public appearance as Mike Smash helped the gym thrive, he couldn't refuse. "I'll do it," Michael said finally, his voice steady, "but no one from school can know." Eddie clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man! You've got nothing to worry about. Just be yourself in there, yourself in the ring, that is." As the days passed, the buzz around the sports fair grew louder. Students speculated wildly about Mike Smash, unaware of the irony that the very idol they admired was quietly sitting among them during math class. Michael found it harder to concentrate as the event drew nearer, his anxiety building with each passing day. Meanwhile, Dylan was grappling with his own inner conflict. He had spent years following Brad's lead, more out of fear than genuine camaraderie. But lately, Brad's cruelty toward Michael had begun to weigh on him. Dylan wasn't sure why it bothered him so much. Maybe it was the quiet strength Michael had shown in the face of humiliation. Or perhaps it was the growing sense that Brad's dominance was built on nothing but bluster. One afternoon, as Dylan wandered the hallways after class, his steps took him to a bulletin board filled with flyers. His eyes lingered on the sports fair poster. The bold image of Mike Smash stared back at him, exuding confidence and power. Dylan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, and for the first time in years, he questioned his loyalty to Brad. Back at the gym, Michael's training sessions grew more intense. Eddie pushed him harder, emphasizing precision and strategy. "Remember, kid," Eddie said during a particularly grueling session, "it's not just about the punches. It's about reading your opponent, staying 3 steps ahead. That's what makes a champion." Michael absorbed every word, channeling his frustration and fear into each strike. As the punching bag swayed under the force of his blows, he pictured the faces of his classmates, their mocking laughter ringing in his ears. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to himself more than anyone else that he was stronger than their ridicule. The night before the fair, Michael lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with scenarios of what could go wrong. What if someone recognized him? What if Brad showed up? Despite his apprehension, he reminded himself of Eddie's words. "Control is strength." He repeated the mantra silently until his breathing slowed and sleep finally overtook him. When the morning of the fair arrived, the school gymnasium was transformed into a bustling hub of activity. Booths for basketball, soccer, and track lined the walls, but the center of attention was the makeshift boxing ring, where Mike Smash would soon make his appearance. Students crowded around, craning their necks for a glimpse of the champion. Michael stood backstage, dressed in his signature red and black boxing gear. The hood of his robe cast a shadow over his face, giving him an air of mystery. Eddie was beside him, offering last-minute encouragement. "You've got this, Michael. Just go out there and show them what you're made of." Taking a deep breath, Michael stepped into the light, the roar of the crowd washing over him like a tidal wave. For a moment, his nerves threatened to overwhelm him, but then he saw Eddie's approving nod from the sidelines. He squared his shoulders and climbed into the ring. The crowd's cheers grew deafening as Michael began his demonstration, his movements fluid and precise. He threw jabs and hooks with practiced ease, each strike landing with a satisfying thud against the pads. As he worked, he could feel the weight of their admiration, a stark contrast to the indifference he faced in the school hallways. Among the crowd, Dylan watched with wide eyes. There was something unmistakable about the way Mike Smash moved, something that reminded him of Michael Carter. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning, leaving him stunned. Could it be true? Could the quiet kid Brad tormented be the same fighter who now commanded the crowd's awe? Dylan didn't have time to dwell on the thought as Brad's voice cut through the noise. "What a joke," Brad scoffed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This guy's nothing special." But even Brad couldn't fully disguise his unease. For the first time, he felt something he wasn't accustomed to: doubt. Michael, oblivious to the unfolding drama, continued his routine, each punch an act of defiance against the doubts that had plagued him for so long. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he was exactly where he belonged. The echoes of the sports fair reverberated through the halls of Riverdale High for days. Michael's performance as Mike Smash had been a resounding success, drawing praise from spectators and securing much-needed visibility for Eddie's gym. Yet for Michael, the spotlight was more daunting than exhilarating. The constant buzz around Mike Smash made him feel as though the walls between his two worlds were thinning. At school, the name Mike Smash became a staple in conversations. Students who had attended the fair excitedly recounted the speed and precision of his punches, while others speculated about what kind of person he might be off the ring. Brad, however, continued to downplay the significance of the event, waving off the excitement with dismissive remarks. "It's just boxing," he scoffed one afternoon in the cafeteria. "Not like it's real talent." Dylan sat quietly beside him, a growing sense of unease gnawing at him. He had spent the weekend replaying the fair in his mind, scrutinizing every detail of Mike Smash's movements. The resemblance to Michael Carter wasn't just a coincidence, it felt undeniable. Yet Dylan hesitated to voice his thoughts. If he was right, revealing Michael's secret could have serious consequences, especially with Brad's unpredictable temper. Meanwhile, Michael threw himself into training, seeking refuge in the familiar rhythm of Eddie's gym. Each session was a careful balance of preparation and release, the repetitive drills grounding him while the sweat-soaked exhaustion cleared his mind. Eddie, as perceptive as ever, noticed the shift in Michael's demeanor. "Something's eating at you, kid," Eddie said one evening as Michael unlaced his gloves. "You've been pushing harder than usual, even for you." Michael hesitated, his hands stilling mid-motion. "It's just... everything feels like it's closing in. The fair was great, but I can't shake the feeling that someone's going to figure it out." Eddie leaned against the ropes, his expression thoughtful. "Look, keeping your secret was always going to be a balancing act. But the truth has a funny way of coming out, no matter how careful you are. When that happens, the only thing you can control is how you handle it." Michael nodded, the weight of Eddie's words settling heavily on his shoulders. He had always known this day would come. It was just a matter of when. The following week, during gym class, the tension between Brad and Michael came to a head. The coach had set up a basketball scrimmage, dividing the students into teams. Michael, as usual, tried to stay out of the fray, passing the ball quickly and avoiding direct confrontations. Brad, however, saw the game as an opportunity to assert his dominance. "Come on, Carter," Brad yelled after Michael missed an easy pass. "You can do better than that. Or is this just another thing you're useless at?" The taunt was met with scattered laughter from their teammates, but Michael's focus didn't waver. He retrieved the ball and passed it off without a word, determined not to rise to the bait. Brad, however, wasn't satisfied. He began targeting Michael more aggressively, blocking his movements and slamming into him under the pretense of gameplay. By the end of the game, Brad's frustration was palpable. He stalked up to Michael as the class dispersed, his chest heaving. "You think you're better than everyone, don't you?" He spat, his voice low but venomous. Michael met Brad's glare with calm eyes. "I don't think anything about you, Brad." The remark, delivered with infuriating composure, lit a fire in Brad. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You better watch yourself, Carter. One day you won't have a crowd to hide behind." Before Michael could respond, the gym coach intervened, ordering both boys to hit the showers. As Michael walked away, he felt Brad's gaze burning into his back, a silent promise that the matter was far from over. Dylan, who had watched the exchange from a distance, found himself torn. Part of him wanted to step in, to finally stand up to Brad, but fear kept him rooted in place. Instead, he approached Michael after class, catching him just outside the locker room. "Hey, Michael," Dylan began, his voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" Michael paused, his expression wary. "What about?" Dylan glanced around to make sure they were alone before lowering his voice. "The sports fair, Mike Smash. It's you, isn't it?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Michael's heart pounded, but his face betrayed nothing. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't lie," Dylan pressed, his tone earnest rather than accusatory. "I've seen you train. The way you move, the way you fight, it's the same. I'm not here to mess with you, I think it's amazing." Michael studied Dylan's face, searching for any sign of malice. What he found instead was genuine admiration, mixed with a hint of guilt. "Why are you telling me this?" Michael asked cautiously. "Because Brad's on to you," Dylan admitted. "He doesn't know the truth yet, but he's not going to stop until he gets something to hold over you. I wanted to warn you before it's too late." Michael's jaw tightened. The walls he had carefully built around his life were closing in faster than he'd anticipated. "Thanks," he said finally, his voice clipped. "But I can handle Brad." Dylan nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "Just be careful, okay?" As Dylan walked away, Michael leaned against the locker room door, his thoughts racing. Dylan's warning was a reminder that his double life was a precarious balancing act, one that could collapse with a single misstep. That evening, Michael returned to the gym with renewed determination. Eddie, sensing the shift in his mood, pushed him harder than usual. By the time Michael left, his muscles ached and his knuckles throbbed, but his resolve was stronger than ever. As he walked home under the dim glow of the streetlights, Michael replayed the events of the day in his mind. He knew the storm was coming, Brad wouldn't back down, and Dylan's discovery only added another layer of complexity to the situation. But Michael also knew one thing for certain. When the time came, he would be ready. The Riverdale High Gymnasium buzzed with excitement as the annual sports fair reached its peak. Students crowded around booths, testing their skills at various activities. In the center of the chaos, Eddie's boxing setup stood out, with punching bags, gloves, and posters showcasing the achievements of Mike Smash. Despite the heavy foot traffic, Michael Carter remained hidden in plain sight, blending into the background as just another assistant from Eddie's gym. Michael's nerves were steady but sharp like a coiled spring. He had chosen his spot carefully, away from the spotlight, while Eddie handled the crowd. Occasionally, he stepped in to adjust someone's stance or demonstrate a basic jab. Every move was deliberate, calculated to maintain his anonymity. Among the sea of faces, Dylan hovered near the booth, his gaze shifting between the equipment and Michael. He had recognized the quiet strength behind Michael's demeanor, but seeing him in this environment reinforced his suspicions. While others saw a shy student, Dylan now saw the focus and discipline of an athlete who thrived under pressure. Brad's arrival shattered the relative calm. He strode into the gymnasium with his usual swagger, his eyes scanning the booths with disinterest. When he spotted the boxing ring, a smirk crept across his face. "Well, well," he muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Looks like they're letting anyone in on this circus." Dylan, standing nearby, tensed as Brad made his way to the boxing booth. He had hoped to keep Brad's attention elsewhere, but the sight of the punching bags was too tempting for the school bully. Brad sauntered over, his loud voice cutting through the air. "Hey, this the place where that so-called champion hangs. Out Mike Smash, right? What kind of name is that?" Eddie, standing behind the booth, didn't rise to the bait. "You interested in learning or just here to talk?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Brad laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Learn what? How to throw a punch? Please, I could take your little champion any day." Eddie raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Michael, who had been adjusting gloves on a younger participant, froze for a fraction of a second before resuming his task. He knew better than to react to Brad's provocations, but the tension in the air was palpable. Dylan stepped forward, his voice hesitant. "Brad, maybe we should check out the other booths. This one's kinda busy." Brad turned to him with a sneer. "What's the matter, Dylan? Scared I might show up your precious little boxing club?" His words carried an edge, but Dylan held his ground, his jaw tightening. Before anyone could respond, Brad's gaze landed on Michael. His eyes narrowed, and a slow, predatory grin spread across his face. "Well, if it isn't Carter, what are you doing here? Trying to learn how to finally stand up for yourself?" Michael straightened, meeting Brad's gaze with calm resolve. "Just helping out." Brad stepped closer, towering over him. "Helping out, huh? Why don't you show me what you've learned? Let's see if all this boxing hype is worth anything." Eddie intervened before things could escalate. "We don't do fights here, kid. This is about discipline, not street brawls." Brad ignored him, his eyes fixed on Michael. "What's the matter? Scared? You always walk away like a coward. Thought maybe you'd grow a spine by now." The words stung, but Michael stayed silent, his fists clenching at his sides. Dylan, sensing the situation spiraling, stepped between them. "Brad, let it go. This isn't the time or place." Brad shoved past Dylan, his focus unrelenting. "Come on, Carter. Prove you're not just the school punching bag." Before Michael, who could respond, Eddie stepped in, his voice like steel. "That's enough. You want to step into the ring? You do it the right way. No insults, no cheap shots. You follow the rules or you don't step in at all." Brad's grin widened. "Fine. Let's make it official. What do you say, Carter? Ready to embarrass yourself?" Michael hesitated, every instinct telling him to walk away. But the crowd around them had grown, their murmurs feeding the tension. He caught Eddie's eye, his coach's silent encouragement grounding him. Finally, Michael nodded. "I'll do it, but not here, not now. The ring with a referee, that's the deal." The gym erupted in whispers, and Brad's bravado faltered for a split second before he recovered. "You're on," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. The confrontation ended as quickly as it had begun, leaving an electric charge in the air. Eddie pulled Michael aside as the crowd dispersed, his expression serious. "You sure about this, kid?" Michael nodded, his jaw set. "He's not going to stop, Eddie. If I don't face him, he'll just keep pushing." Eddie sighed, resting, a hand on Michael's shoulder. "All right, but you do this on your terms. No shortcuts, no ego. You fight smart, not angry. Got it?" "Got it," Michael said, his voice steady. Dylan lingered near the booth, guilt and admiration warring within him. He approached Michael cautiously. "You didn't have to agree, you know," he said quietly. Michael glanced at him, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "I did. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them." Dylan nodded, his respect for Michael growing. "If you need anything, I'm here." As the fair wound down, Michael packed up the equipment with Eddie, his thoughts racing. The fight wasn't just about proving himself to Brad, it was about reclaiming his narrative, showing the school and himself who he truly was. The storm was brewing, but Michael was ready. The day of the fight loomed like a storm cloud over Riverdale High, its presence unavoidable. Whispers about the upcoming match between Michael Carter and Brad Johnson spread like wildfire through the school. For once, Michael wasn't invisible. His name was murmured in hallways, mentioned in conversations, and scribbled on the corners of notebooks. Brad, ever the showman, thrived on the attention, turning every interaction into an opportunity to fan the flames of excitement. Michael, on the other hand, remained a figure of calm amid the growing chaos. He focused on his training, pushing his body to its limits under Eddie's watchful eye. The gym became his refuge, the rhythmic pounding of gloves on heavy bags, a steady reminder of his purpose. Each jab, hook, and uppercut was precise, measured, and deliberate, a stark contrast to the uncontrolled aggression Brad would undoubtedly bring to the ring. Eddie's voice cut through the sharp sounds of fists meeting leather. "Michael, remember what I taught you. Brad's going to come at you with brute force, but he doesn't have your discipline. Don't let his chaos pull you off balance." Michael nodded, sweat dripping from his brow as he adjusted his stance. "I won't. This fight isn't about proving him wrong, it's about proving myself right." The night of the match arrived, and the small gymnasium where Eddie held his amateur bouts was packed to capacity. Word had spread beyond the school, drawing in curious locals and boxing enthusiasts eager to see the showdown. The hum of anticipation filled the air as spectators jostled for a good view, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony of excitement. Michael sat in the dimly lit locker room, his hands wrapped tightly in tape as Eddie adjusted his gloves. The room smelled of liniment and sweat, the familiar scents grounding him as he prepared to step into the spotlight. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to calm the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stay focused," Eddie said, his voice low but firm. "You've trained for this. Trust your instincts and stick to the plan." Michael opened his eyes, meeting Eddie's gaze with unwavering determination. "I will." On the other side of the gym, Brad was basking in the attention of his small entourage. His bravado was on full display as he shadowboxed for an audience of cheerleaders and friends, his laughter echoing off the walls. But beneath the surface, there was a flicker of something else, a trace of doubt that he couldn't quite shake. The crowd erupted as the announcer stepped into the ring, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's main event features two fighters who need no introduction. In the red corner, weighing in at 160 pounds, the undefeated, unstoppable Riverdale High's own Mike Smash. Michael emerged from the locker room, his robe draped over his shoulders and the hood casting a shadow over his face. The roar of the crowd washed over him like a tidal wave, but he kept his focus on the ring. This was his stage, and he would claim it on his terms. In the blue corner, the announcer continued, weighing in at 180 pounds, the challenger with something to prove, Brad the Bulldog Johnson. Brad strutted to the ring, his confidence radiating as he waved to the crowd. The difference in their energy was palpable. Michael's quiet intensity versus Brad's performative bluster. As they met in the center of the ring for the referee's instructions, the contrast became even clearer. Brad smirked, leaning in just close enough to taunt. "Hope you're ready to kiss the canvas, Carter." Michael didn't flinch. He met Brad's gaze with steady resolve, his silence speaking volumes. The referee stepped back, signaling for the fight to begin. The first round was a study in contrasts. Brad charged forward with wild swings, his fists flying in reckless abandon. Michael, true to his training, remained calm and calculated, weaving out of reach and landing clean counters. Each punch he delivered was sharp and precise, a testament to years of discipline under Eddie's guidance. By the end of the round, the difference in their conditioning was evident. Brad was already breathing heavily, his frustration mounting as his punches failed to connect. Michael, on the other hand, was steady and composed, his movements fluid and deliberate. The second round saw Brad double down on his aggression, throwing everything he had into each punch. He managed to corner Michael against the ropes, landing a few solid blows to the body. The crowd erupted, sensing a potential shift in momentum. But Michael remained unfazed, using his footwork to slip free and reset the pace of the fight. "Stay patient," Eddie called from the corner as the round ended. "He's tiring himself out. Let him come to you." The third round was a turning point. Brad's swings grew slower and sloppier, his footwork faltering as fatigue set in. Michael seized the opportunity, landing a series of crisp jabs and a devastating hook that sent Brad stumbling backward. The crowd's cheers reached a fever pitch as Michael pressed the advantage, his punches landing with precision. Desperation fueled Brad's final effort. He lunged forward with a wild haymaker, putting all his remaining strength into the swing. Michael saw it coming, slipping under the punch with practiced ease and countering with a powerful uppercut. The impact was thunderous, and Brad crumpled to the canvas, the referee stepping in to begin the count. The crowd held its collective breath as the referee counted to 10. Brad struggled to rise, but couldn't find his footing. The match was over. The gym erupted in cheers as the announcer declared Michael the winner. He stood in the center of the ring, his hand raised in victory, the roar of the crowd washing over him. But Michael's focus wasn't on the accolades or the noise, it was on the journey that had brought him here. He had faced his fears, stood his ground, and proven that his strength came not from anger, but from discipline and determination. As Brad was helped to his feet by his corner, he looked at Michael with a mix of exhaustion and something else: respect. For the first time, the school bully saw the quiet strength that had always been there, hidden in plain sight. The storm had passed, and Michael stood tall, his place in both the ring and Riverdale High forever changed. The morning after the fight, Riverdale High was buzzing with energy. Whispers and fragments of conversations echoed through the hallways. "Did you see the match?" one student murmured wide-eyed. Carter knocked him out cold, another replied, the disbelief evident in their tone. Michael Carter, the once invisible student, was now at the center of attention, though he made no effort to bask in it. He walked through the corridors with his usual calm demeanor, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The bruises on his face were faint reminders of the battle he'd endured, but his steps were steady, his gaze focused. He wasn't looking for validation, he'd already found it within himself. Dylan caught up with Michael outside their math class, his expression a mix of guilt and admiration. Hey, he said, his voice tentative, how are you holding up? Michael glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I'm fine. Dylan hesitated before speaking again. That was incredible. I mean, what you did out there, standing up to Brad like that, it took guts. It wasn't about Brad, Michael replied, his tone measured. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need to run anymore. Dylan nodded, his respect for Michael deepening. I get it, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry, for all the times I stood by and didn't say anything. Michael met his gaze, the honesty in Dylan's words clear. Thanks. It means more than you know. As the bell rang, the two of them stepped into class, their silent truce a testament to the quiet transformations taking place. Meanwhile, Brad's return to school was markedly different. The swagger that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a subdued demeanor. He moved through the halls with his head slightly lowered, avoiding the stares and whispers that followed him. For the first time in years, Brad Johnson was no longer the king of Riverdale High. By lunchtime, Brad found himself at a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, away from his usual crowd. He pushed his food around on his tray, the humiliation of his loss still fresh in his mind. But it wasn't just the defeat that weighed on him. It was the realization that his unchecked arrogance had cost him more than just a fight. As he sat there, lost in thought, a shadow fell across the table. Looking up, he saw Michael standing there, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the tension between them thick. Then Michael gestured to the empty seat across from Brad. "Mind if I sit?" Michael asked, his voice calm. Brad hesitated before nodding. "Sure." Michael sat down, placing his tray on the table but not touching it. He looked at Brad, his gaze steady but not confrontational. "I didn't agree to that fight to humiliate you," he began. "I just wanted it to stop. The bullying, the intimidation. It's not who I am to hurt people, Brad." Brad let out a bitter laugh. "Could have fooled me. You knocked me flat on my back." "That wasn't about hurting you," Michael said. "It was about showing you that strength isn't about how loud you are or how many people you can push around. It's about control, discipline, respect." Brad looked down at his tray, his jaw tightening. "I don't know how to be like that," he admitted quietly. Michael leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "You can start by being honest, with yourself and with others. People will forgive mistakes if you're willing to change." Brad nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know if I can fix everything." "You don't have to do it all at once," Michael said. "Just take the first step." The conversation ended without fanfare, but something in Brad's expression had shifted. The walls he had built around himself were beginning to crack, and for the first time, he seemed willing to let them fall. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere at Riverdale High began to change. Brad's transformation was gradual but genuine. He apologized to the students he had tormented, his words awkward but heartfelt. While not everyone accepted his apologies immediately, his sincerity won over many. Dylan, who had distanced himself from Brad, found himself reconnecting with his old friend, their relationship redefined by mutual respect rather than fear. Michael, meanwhile, found a new sense of belonging at Eddie's gym. Students who had witnessed the fight began to show up, curious to learn from the champion they had come to admire. Michael took on a mentoring role, helping newcomers navigate the basics of boxing while sharing the lessons Eddie had taught him. Eddie watched with pride as the gym grew into a community, a place where discipline and camaraderie thrived. "You've done good, kid," he told Michael one evening as the last of the students left. "This place wouldn't be the same without you." Michael smiled, his heart full. "It's not just me, Eddie. You built this. I'm just keeping it going." One Friday afternoon, the school held an assembly to recognize the students who had contributed to the success of the sports fair. As the principal called Michael's name, the applause was thunderous. He stepped onto the stage, his movements confident but humble. Taking the microphone, he addressed the crowd with the same quiet strength he carried into the ring. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady. "For a long time, I thought that being quiet meant being invisible, but I've learned that true strength doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It comes from knowing who you are and standing firm in that, no matter what." The crowd erupted into cheers, their admiration for Michael clear. Among them, Brad clapped along, a small but genuine smile on his face. By the end of the school year, Riverdale High was a different place. The shadows of bullying and fear had lifted, replaced by a spirit of resilience and unity. Michael Carter had become more than a quiet student or a boxing champion. He had become a symbol of what it meant to rise above adversity and inspire others to do the same. As Michael walked out of the school building for the last time that year, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was ready to face it, one step at a time.
If you enjoyed the story and want to see more content like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and turning on notifications.